Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the overall economic situation. We've also seen an increase in the rupee as far as with the dollar, and also as far as overall the stabilizing of the situation is concerned, whether that's going to play a role in doing better as far as the rupee against dollar is concerned. Also, of course, the government is looking very soon at the next budget. We're also seeing a slash as far as petrol and diesel prices are concerned. What are the ramifications of these changes overall as far as the political situation and also that relevant to the economy is concerned? We'll be asking Bilal Azhar Kayani, who's coordinator to PM on economy today. What does he expect from the budget? Also, what are the likely changes we can expect in the next year or so? All of that today on Perspective. Ji, Bilal Sahab, like I was saying, of course, this is a welcome change that we've seen as far as dollar against the rupee is concerned. Is it going to sustain or is it, do you think, as far as trends are concerned? Because this seems to be a historic high as far as rupee is concerned after a long time.
Ji, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for having me on your show. So I'll start with the question that you've asked. The rupee decrease that you saw, I think yesterday morning or over the course of yesterday, was primarily driven by the decision by the State Bank to issue a circular, as per which dealers or banks which were responsible for making or fulfilling credit card payments, they no longer have to only rely on the open market. They can now tap into the interbank market in order to make those payments. So that's reduced the pressure on the open market. That's why we saw a reduction in the price of the dollar in the open market, and you saw a shrinking of the gap between the interbank rate and the open market rate. I think as far as the effect of that specific action is concerned, I think that'll sustain. But as you know, foreign exchange rates, the rate of the dollar is determined by many things. Demand and supply and other factors come into play as well. So, but demand and supply fundamentally, and hence it's one can't say that the dollar will remain at a certain rate, but we do hope. And we are confident that it will stabilize. We are also in talks with the IMF. As you've seen, the government has taken a lot of measures to stabilize our foreign exchange reserves. They're currently at 4 billion. They're a lot lower than what we'd like them to be, but we have seen a bucking of the trend of high current account deficits. The government has run a current account surplus for the past couple of months. We're trying to also ensure that we can reach a staff level agreement with the IMF. So we'll continue to make those efforts so that we can shore up our foreign exchange reserves, and then eventually also focus on improving our exports and through various means. So when it comes to shoring up foreign exchange reserves, that entails inflows from bilateral and multilateral partners, the IMF program, as well as an increase through exports.
But also you mentioned IMF, and of course, we've seen the delay as far as the agreement is concerned. There were earlier also rumors that the staff level agreement had been reached, and then that didn't really pan out. To what do you attribute this? Would you say trust deficit? Is it the last government that we've seen, the delay that we've seen? Is it overall international politics? What do you attribute it?
So that's a good question. If you'll allow me, I'll provide some context as well. So as you know, the Imran Khan government agreed a program which we believe is substandard, and back in 2019 initially he said he'd never go to the IMF. He ended up agreeing a program with the IMF which was substandard. Right when the program was to be finalized, he fired his finance minister and a bunch of other people from his economic team, and they ended up agreeing a substandard program. They struggled to adhere to the terms of that program that they themselves had agreed, which is why that program remained stop-start for a long while. And then in 2021, around October or November, Shaukat Tareen, the finance minister at the time, agreed with the IMF certain terms, a set of actions which also included commitments regarding the petroleum development levy. And then in March, around February, March, when Imran Khan realized that he's no longer going to be able to retain power, he very recklessly and irresponsibly decided to renege on his own commitments, and you know, the IMF and the rest of us learned from the television that not only have they broken their commitments to the IMF, they've actually done the opposite, which is, you know, reckless subsidization of the petroleum prices. And that resulted in in the stalling of the IMF program.
Okay.
And later on, when our government assumed power, we brought IMF back to the table as quickly as we could. There was a huge trust deficit, which you alluded to earlier. That trust deficit was because of the fact that Imran Khan and his team had consistently said one thing to the IMF and done the other. But so it was not easy to bring them back to the table. But when they did come, they needed the level of threshold, the threshold that would usually be required with IMF programs in the past. This was different. It was different this time because the level of assurances they needed was higher, because generally in the past you would agree one thing, and it would be, you would say that we will implement these actions now. We agree to do this by this date, and you would come to an arrangement. This time there were a lot more things that they wanted to be done now in order to move forward with the program, and the things that they were willing to accept as promises was a lot less. Nonetheless, we resumed the program, and even at that time, Shaukat Tareen and Taimur Jhagra, at the behest of Imran Khan, tried to sabotage the program by writing letters, which they said that was never their intention, but then we saw the audio leaks that came out. Subsequently, we've continued with the program. The current, the 9th review is it is delayed. I mean, we would have liked to have reached a staff level agreement with the IMF much earlier. We believe, the government believes, that we have fulfilled the commitments that are required to proceed further and for the staff level agreement to be reached. And this is exactly what the government is trying to convince the IMF officials about, that those commitments have been fulfilled. The liaison and the dialogue with them at various levels is on a daily basis, because not only is there dialogue at the finance minister level, but generally, the liaison between the government of Pakistan and the IMF is done through the finance secretary, through other officials in the finance ministry, FBR, State Bank. They all have their own liaisons. So we're working with them to reach that staff level agreement soon. But yes, I would say this, that there is a trust deficit, which is a direct consequence of the way Imran Khan dealt with them. We've done well, this government has done well to bridge that deficit and to get this program going. But yes, we're still in the process of rebuilding the trust that was broken.
But there is some criticism also coming that, the way that the government dealt with IMF, perhaps, ruffled some feathers. Is that, how would you respond to that criticism?
I think what the present government has been trying to do is, from day one, we've been trying to balance two priorities to begin with, and then the third priority became a necessity.
Okay.
And the first two priorities were, firstly, to avert default, which is what we did, to strengthen our foreign exchange reserves. Part of that was bringing IMF back to the table. That is how we averted default. And we continue to do that. So we are continuing to work to ensure that default is averted, that foreign exchange reserves are improved, that our current account deficit, that our fiscal deficit, both of the deficits are reduced for our macroeconomic stability. But at the same time, the second priority is to ensure that even in these very difficult economic times, both from a macroeconomic perspective and especially the effects of inflation, that we try to protect our vulnerable segments of society, the poorest segments of society, as much as we can. And we've tried to do that, whether it was the free atta scheme, whether it was increasing the envelope of the Benazir income support program, whether it was the 1,800 billion rupees Kisan package, which has resulted in a bumper wheat crop. So we've tried to ensure that we take, and the Prime Minister has tried to ensure, along with the allies in the government, we've tried to ensure that we take all necessary measures to protect our vulnerable segments even then. But the third priority that got added and complicated matters, and was part of the reason why the IMF program got delayed, because the agreed plan sort of got affected heavily by that, were the floods, the catastrophic floods that we saw. And so, it required a lot of spending on relief, rehabilitation, and now reconstruction efforts. Those are still continuing. So the government continues to balance these three priorities, and that is exactly what we've been trying to convince the IMF about, that it is our responsibility to ensure that we carry all three of these priorities together at the same time.
As far as inflation is concerned, certainly, we've seen it's at a record high. Do you expect it, to go down now? Will it happen with the IMF, or do you think that, the overall trend? Because, like you said, the vulnerable segments of society and the fact that, they're really feeling the pinch, that's also no secret. Do you think it's going to come down at all, the inflation
I
factor?
think we do expect inflation to start trending downwards.
Okay.
I think I was reading the figures today, and I'll double check. Sensitive price index is lower than it was last week. It's still very high. We would like it to be significantly lower, but it's encouraging to see a downwards trend. And we'll continue to work to do whatever the government can to reduce inflation. However, it is important to understand that a lot of the inflation that we are seeing is due to exogenous factors that are not in the government's control, such as global inflation. We saw in the past, part of the reason that we saw a jump in inflation was the increase in the exchange rate. But the government is working to ensure that whatever factors it can control, such as administrative measures, or wherever we see a cartelization or restriction of supply inside the country due to malified intent, where supply is available but people are trying to manipulate prices or rent-seeking behavior. The government is trying to keep an eye on that, and is also urging the provincial governments to do the same, because a lot of the administrative measures are in their control. But yes, we do expect inflation to have a downward trend soon. And I think the larger picture that I would like your audience to understand is that, when we assumed power, we inherited an economy that had been bruised and battered for 4 years. And then on the way out, Imran Khan set that economy literally on fire by deliberately pushing the economy towards default, by deliberately reneging on his own commitments to the IMF at a time when we didn't have enough foreign exchange reserves to afford to do that. So we have been, this government has been firefighting whilst also trying to protect vulnerable segments. We are still not, we're still in that phase. Once we have attained a certain level of macroeconomic stability, we will again try to pump growth back into the economy. We will again try to increase our development spending. I think you will see a reflection of that in the budget that will come through as well. You saw that the Prime Minister is chairing meetings himself. Both the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister are meeting a bunch of people from various sectors, from various industries, to ensure that we get the maximum amount of input into the budget making process, and to spend as much as we can on measures which will provide relief to the public and would help spur growth.
Certainly, as far as this year is concerned, it's also very near to the elections, and of course the government is also looking at that. You're also looking at the next budget also. With respect to giving people-friendly initiatives, relief in that quota, the government is working on that also? See,
the government is always working to find ways to provide relief to the masses. It is always trying to find measures that it can responsibly take, that can reach the poorest and improve the standard of living of the poorest, to provide relief to them as quickly as possible. Because and that has been the priority of this government and our party in particular throughout all our tenures. So it is not about the fact that it is an election year or anything of that sort. I mean, if we wanted to be reckless, or if we just wanted to be populist, or if we just wanted to do stuff which would just get us some cheap headlines, whilst knowing that it would significantly increase the risk of our macroeconomic stability, or would increase the risk of default, we could have done that last year. Imran Khan already tried to do that by just blowing up the deficits, increasing expenditures, not raising enough taxes. You had a record fiscal deficit last year of over 5,000 billion rupees. You had a record trade deficit when he left. That's the easiest thing to do. But that's reckless, that's irresponsible, that's not parties that actually care about Pakistan, that's not what they do. And so that is why, even at a political cost, we've tried to ensure that this government acts responsibly. We provide relief where we can, but at the same time, we keep the medium and long-term sustainability of our economy in mind. We try to set the ground for the sort of structural reforms that are required to improve our economy in the medium and long term. We try to correct the path. We try to complete the IMF program. We're trying to balance all these things, and it is that is the job of any responsible government to do that. That is what we're doing now. That is what you will see reflected in the budget, and that is what you will see, inshallah, when our party comes to power again after elections.
Right, fair enough. Thank you so much for giving us your time, Bilal Sahab, and your input as far as economy is concerned. We'll be taking a short break, after which we'll come back and talk about more on what the next budget will look like, and how soon we can see a change as far as reduction in inflation is concerned, and overall a better trend of economy is concerned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We have with us Saddam Hussein, who is Assistant Chief Policy at PIDE. Thank you so much for being with us. We also have with us Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, former advisor, Ministry of Finance. Thank you for joining us. Ji, Saddam Sahab, like I said, as far as situation, we were earlier also talking about this, that as far as the discrepancy is concerned between the dollar that you get in the open market and the interbank is, has been over time. We've seen, that trend. It's getting further and further. It's a huge discrepancy. It's reduced somewhat recently, but what do you expect now in the future? The government has also, I believe, changed as far as the credit card payments are concerned. There has been change there also. Do you expect it to further reduce? Because I think that the government is making efforts there at this time.
Yes, it was the result of regulatory change that they have made, that the interbank rate would be followed when you use the credit card. So, and the gap between the interbank rate and open market rate was reduced over the time, but and I guess due to this regulation it would reinforce the capital inflow into the country through remittances, and when we see capital inflow, the gap will further reduce because we'll be purchasing more dollar, more inflow of the dollars. So in the next couple of months, if the trend remains same, so the things will be much better in the shape, and the capital inflow will keep coming, and the gap will keep reducing, and it will also have an impact on exchange rate.
Let me go to Dr. Khaqan. Ji, Dr. Khaqan, there is, we've over time spoken about the fact that of course we need IMF, we need to go back on the IMF program. Also that there was only one program that actually concluded successfully as far as Pakistan is concerned. In terms of the situation now, what do you expect? Of course, it's also the budget year. The government again is balancing a lot of, has a lot of balls up in the air at this time. What do you expect now?
So Mahrukh, good to be on PTV World again. Mahrukh, my positions always remain this, that whenever a country is in a balance of payments challenge, in which Pakistan has been for the last 14 to 18 months. It started when our reserves started to go down. This is December 21, when we were holding $18 billion of reserves, and we started facing a challenge. Pakistan should have used IMF as an anchor. Even today, with $4 billion of reserves, which hardly meets a month's imports, and those imports, I was just looking at the figures for May, they've just come out, again about $4.3 billion in imports. Which of course we've administratively tried to hold on to this level because we have a dollar liquidity crunch. So IMF is your best option. Now, where do we stand with the IMF? I think the government has made a sincere effort to complete the 9th review. I will give them that credit. The fact is that it got delayed from 3rd of November when I talked to you on 1st of June. Now, that's a long delay for any staff level agreement to be done on the 9th review. Over the past few months, the government took decisive actions on the conditionalities that were agreed with the fund, but even that was not enough. And here, I think IMF is being extra careful as well. The financing need is, I think, the biggest challenge that we've faced. They wanted $6 billion. Pakistan had put together $4.5 billion. This $1.5 billion gap has remained a bone of contention. And I personally feel that having done, sat in both these programs, the current one and the one DARSA finished, which I keep saying is the only program Pakistan has ever done under this finance minister's leadership, that when we have the SLA, then this $4.5 billion would go much higher. We've returned, for example, $3 billion in commercial financing. That would come back. Why is it not coming back? Our ratings are down. We don't have an SLA with the IMF. So obviously, every bank is trying, even if every bank tries to do so, is unable to do so because their credit conditions are not met, whether that's the UAE banks or the others. Um, so let's hope the ninth review SLA is done. In case it's not done, I think things will remain tough for the government, for the country, because we will still remain in this dollar liquidity crunch, and this government will be there till August mid sometime. So sailing through would become quite difficult. I think this is also the second fact that IMF should realize, that these kinds of things would put more pressure on Pakistan. And they've spoken about political stability and things like that. Having the SLA would create some kind of stability to move into an interim setup and then on to elections as well. The
But
other thing they've
Dr.
asked for
Khaqan,
is
we've also seen that overall, as far as the government is concerned, this crunch that you're talking about, that it's facing, like you said, it's the election year, so they're going to have to balance a lot of things. The rollover payments from China, for example, do you think they will have some effect on the overall situation?
So, Mahrukh, having dealt with all the governments, including the Chinese, I sincerely tell you, whenever we've gone to them, I'll give you an example. Interim government 2018, Pakistan needed some bridge financing at that time, requested $2 billion from China, and the money came in. Whenever we've gone to the Chinese. Right now, I think about 1.7 billion of refinancing of the monies we gave back to the Chinese commercial banks. They've done it without even the IMF being there. China is your biggest, China has kind of become the lender of the last resort, which was actually what IMF should have been doing. But China can also go to an extent, right? I mean, their liquidity to us is not unlimited. And right now, I'm also seeing some issues with the IPP's payments that are due to China. So we have to remain careful, and that's why hopefully the ninth review completion, if that doesn't happen, then Chinese, Saudi, UAE, some monies, some commercial financing, and at maybe at a higher rate, and we sail through till we look for another new IMF program. Mahrukh, let me also say, what you opened with Saddam on the rupee getting closer in the interbank, and this was a condition that Nathan Porter had clearly put from the IMF side, that your FX market is not functioning properly. And so the government took away the $100 to $150 million of monthly payment from the open market to the interbank, and that changed the sentiment, as well as the fact that the actual dollar flow out of the open market also slowed. I don't think the government could have immediately done more. So they had this and they went ahead. Actually, this will, I think, increase the interbank rate, but bring the open market down and have the kind of functioning that Mr. Porter is talking about as he spoke with Pakistan. And the last thing is budget, and maybe we could discuss.
Before I go to Saddam Saab here, do you think so? So it's going to have an effect on the overall reduction as far as dollar is concerned?
I think what is going to happen is that the open market and the interbank, which had moved to about 11% difference, traditionally is around 2%. Right now it's hovering around 5%. I think pretty much there. But this is like a random walk. It's hard to predict currency in the short term. There are so many factors. So let's see what happens on the SLA, and then maybe one could be more clearer.
Right. Let me come back to you.
I would like
Saddam
to add something which Khaqan Najeeb sir pointed out. The difference between the Chinese lending and IMF lending has a fundamental difference in it. When Chinese lenders, they give us money as a friend, and it gives us a breathing space for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and we have to give it back, obviously. But what IMF gives us, IMF is not just an IMF. It's not an organization, it's not a country, it's not a bilateral partner. It's a fund. People fund into IMF. So IMF gives us fund when the top 10 funding countries give a positive nod, which includes US, which includes even India and some France, etc. So that means when top 10 countries of the funders of the IMF, they give a positive nod, only then IMF lends to country like
Country
us.
like us.
So means when those top 10 countries are comfortable giving a positive signal that okay, we can give the loan to Pakistan, then IMF releases the fund, and that means that those 10 countries also show confidence in Pakistan. So other than the IMF, those 10 countries, investments and FDI
So
and
you're
the
saying a lot of
capital
politics is
inflow,
involved.
yeah, and the politics and the confidence of the funding countries. So with the IMF, the top 10 countries show confidence, the capital inflow begins, some investments incomes begins, and bilateral loans start coming into the country, and that when top 10 countries and IMF together show confidence, then it gives confidence to the other organization, other investments, FDIs. So it's like a spillover effect. So with IMF, you have a spillover effect of the FDI, capital inflows, and other lending countries, which is like the bilateral. So Chinese lending and IMF lending is
Two different.
this one-time shot, and the IMF is like a spillover effect, exponential effect. So I guess that's the difference we need to understand. So IMF is important for us, but again, the point is what IMF is giving us is again 2 months breathing space for us. So it gives us enough space to just move around a bit and do some reforms. So beyond IMF, we have to think when we get the breathing space, what we have to do in that breathing space. So I guess that's important. Our focus should not be primarily on IMF, but on the reforms we have to do in that breathing space.
Fair enough. Let me go to Dr. Khaqan ji. Dr. Khaqan, but at what Saddam Sahib is saying, of course, he's saying that we have to look at those reforms that we have to undertake for IMF, right? On the other hand, of course, the government also, again, is going to be giving the next budget very soon. It's also going to be looking at how this affects their, pro-people policies, all of that, considering the timeline for them at this time. Then you see an IMF which is being increasingly difficult. So to balance all of those, it's going to be quite tough, and it's proving to be difficult, no?
So, Mahrukh, a lot of people for the last 12 to 14 months have said that, IMF is a given. What else we should do? So let me say this. As Saddam rightly said, IMF's stamp of approval means something very different from any borrowing, absolutely. And Saddam's right in saying that. But I have always said to everyone that doing an IMF program is not a walk in the park. If it was, Pakistan would not have not been able to do 22 programs and do only one program. And because I anchored that program for Pakistan.
So what has happened, in your opinion, what has gone wrong those 22 times? The
right.
one factor you feel.
So, the number of factors there, Pakistan, whatever, at times, so let's talk generically. I've seen other countries also. Recipient countries agree on something and then they move away from them. They agree on a budget that will be, non-expansionary. They give an expansionary budget. They agree that we will not give a subsidy on petrol, but then they go ahead and, put a subsidy on petrol. As conditions locally put pressure on countries, they tend to do stuff which the IMF tends to not like. In the 13-16 program, I think something also was very different for Pakistan. Pakistan got very, very lucky in the sense that Pakistan's team at that time, the technical team, was very strong. Because I know the technical team now also, I knew the technical team at the time also, led by the current finance minister. We had a very, very strong technical team, and we had gotten guys in every area. You got to remember, 11 PhDs from top universities in the US are arriving to judge you. You've got to put the same team together. If you can't, then you will have issues convincing them on a very simple aspect that a 6 billion is not needed. We need 4.5. We will get another 2 billion coming in once we have your SLA. Things like this. But having said that, what is Pakistan's best policy option? Number one, get a 9th review done. Number two, do a budget which is fiscally very, very responsible, not for the IMF, but for Pakistan itself. Number three, start discussing a new program as soon as you enter 1st of July when this program ends. If you are able to do the 9th review, Mahrukh, getting the new program would be easier. If you are unable to do the 9th review, getting a new program would become terribly difficult. But we have to get a new program, and let me also say this, and I'm saying this for the first time, Pakistan should now be looking at a 4-year plan, not a 3-year facility, a big facility, a 4-year facility in which we start talking about fundamental issues like debt restructuring, or debt reprofiling, as I've always said, and some more very severe issues that we need to deal. And then, as Saddam said, that gives you the breathing space. Then, for God's sakes, use your local universities, your local scholars, and put a Pakistan plan together. The new government that comes in October, whether it's PDM or any other party, a single party government, you need to put a Pakistan plan together where you're able to solve the Pakistan issues. I think that's the course of action. Let's see how much of all that gets done. That will determine the economic stabilization in the coming year or so.
Let me come back to you. Saddam Sahab, you heard what Dr. Khaqan is saying. Pakistan plan that he's talking about, putting that together, of course, that may be the next step, or it may be the goal. But the point is, isn't IMF making things increasingly difficult for the government at this time?
Exactly. What Mr. Khaqan Najeeb said, that it's not an easy job to walk through the IMF program. I would just give an example. Whenever when we were students, we would say, if I get a chance, I would prepare for exam this time very properly. But when next time comes, we don't prepare for the exam. So it's kind of that student behavior that we as a country have, and other countries as well, that we agree to things, but when we walk through them, we feel the heat, and we cannot do due to our preferences, priorities, local elections, local things, local equation. So we cannot do certain things, but at the time when we need, we agree certain things. Yes, IMF has a bit of the politics is also attached to it. It's not without the politics. So IMF has a technical program that it wants us to implement, but at the side it has the politics strings attached to it. If, for example, our closeness with China and the changing regional economics and the global economics, China and Russia bloc, and we are still in a balancing act between the US and the new bloc emerging. So I guess US wants US wants some assurance that we have to pick a bloc, either American bloc.
So there is a lot of politics involved.
Yes, there is also that factor. So I guess they need some kind of assurance in which camp we are. But Pakistan have repeatedly said that
we're not
we
going
are
to be
not
part
in
of
any
bloc.
camp. Yes, but it's time, I guess, we have to pick our camp, not in a sense of to against some other country, but as a regional
Whatever
economics is emerging. So I guess we have to focus on the region, and that may have advantages for us. But for now, we need IMF program. So we are in a tight situation. We are walking a tight rope. So we are on the lower end of the flow of the because IMF is giving us the funds. So we have to implement, and it is in our benefit. It will benefit the Pakistan's economy. And Mr. Khaqan Najeeb said that we have to put together a Pakistan plan. We at PIDE, at Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, have last year we came up with the reform agenda, which focuses every sector of the economy. And now we have the Charter of Economy, which is open to debate. We are not saying that this is a final document. It is a live document, and we have invited and still inviting people to debate on it. So in some areas we don't need money, we don't need fiscal things, we just need a stroke of a pen. We need to, like, ease of doing business, which the Prime Minister as well said that in the coming budget we will try to ease things for the businessmen. So we have talked to the industry, we have talked to the people, industrialists, and they said we need certainty. What we need from the government, certainty was the only word. So I guess in the next budget you have to give them a signal.
And that's going to come from political stability, which we are seeing a little bit now.
Yes, political stability and signaling. I guess the government has to signal that we will give the certainty, not the political stability, but the incentive mechanism to the industry, and whatever we are giving to the industry, the industrial framework, it would remain same for few years at least, for 5 years or 8 years. So at least when a large industrialist comes, when the large investments comes in, he puts in everything in the equation. So when he doesn't know what's going to happen after 1 week or 1 month, he won't put his money in our country. So he should know that next 8 years he's safe, he can play safe, the ground is leveled for him. So I guess this is what we proposed at PIDE, and this is what the Prime Minister has hinted that he would signal to the government, to the industry and large-scale manufacturing. So I guess that is a step in the right direction, and acknowledgement of this issue is also a big step forward. So I guess I'm hoping that the industry will be given a signal, and large-scale manufacturing would be signal that they can play a long game and play safe and do the investment and bring FDI and bring their money into the country.
Let me come back to Dr. Khaqan. This investor confidence, things that will eventually lead to investor confidence, the one being that there is some kind of predictability, some kind of certainty. Those will play a role as far as our own market is concerned, as far as our own business here, you know, overall investor confidence is concerned.
So Mahrukh, I've always used a term for the past 12 to 14 months, and I've said Pakistan needs a charter of certainty. And what I meant by that is, first you need a charter where you can decide when the electoral process will play out, how it will play out. If it wants to, the government and the opposition could have decided on the October elections. They had gone on that path. Then a charter of certainty on the business processes in Pakistan. A charter of certainty on the external funding that should be there, a charter of certainty that you want to be fiscally responsible, a charter of certainty that you do believe that the economy is in a very challenging position and you need to put a set of competent people on the government side who can operationally take this forward. So a charter of certainty is all that Pakistan needs. At the academic level, it is true you can have these, charter of economy or whatever you call. But when you come to granular level to take them to ground and you operationalize these plans, this is something very, very different. You read the manifestos of most of the parties, they all say we want to privatize. Is there anyone who will say that PIA made a loss of 90 billion rupees in 2022, but we don't want to sell it, we want to hold on to it? It will not be like that. Many parties would want to sell it. Many parties would believe having steel mill not sold a couple of years ago because there was, as I've used this term, over judicialization of issues in Pakistan has caused, the exchequer a large amount of money. But actually taking these forward is a very, very different thing. Imagining something, then taking it granularly on paper and then operationalizing it. These are very, very different things, require very, very different kinds of people who have expertise to do this. So, I think that's what Pakistan now has to really start looking at, the competence of the technical people who will take this process forward. And let's see, come October, can we really put that team together, which can do the IMF on the side? When 13 to 16 we were doing the IMF, none of the folks in the country were even aware that, Pakistan has completed 12 reviews, everything was put in order, our reserves had risen, I think we had gone to $24-26 billion. Things were looking very different at that time. We were doing CPEC all along. This Chinese issue, Saddam's right, we were doing CPEC all along. 11,000 megawatts of CPEC came in the last government along with the IMF. We raised the income support program from 24 billion rupees to 124 billion. No one objected. So what I'm trying to say is that as you put a competent side together, things will start looking better. I know things are looking very challenging to people. Of course, with inflation and the external factors put together, then the flood situation, things are looking good. Our response should be equally strong. The government has tried its best, short time period, new government, and as I keep saying, they've faced a difficult situation settling in. Political instability has been there, and heightened political instability to the level that IMF the IMF chief came in and talked about it. He shouldn't have. Probably it's unusual, but look at the level of concern that has been raised on issues. So now I think calm has to come down. Certainty is the right word. Everyone's looking for it. Let's hope that an electoral cycle, a new government defines all these things in this manner.
Right, fair enough. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today. Saddam Hussain Sahab, thank you for being with us. Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, thank you for making the time. Overall, of course, we've agreed, certainty seems to be the order of the day. We want there to be certainty to be able to predict market trends, to be able to restore investor confidence, to be able to get the rupee off the ground. And of course, the government has been making all efforts to do so. We've seen a certain, as far as the discrepancy between the interbank and the open market, significant reduction there. We're hoping for more where that's coming from, and for overall, as far as the budget is concerned, for it to come down and give us more, reduce inflation perhaps, and of course the slash in petrol and diesel. Let's hope that things get better. We're looking at the overall trends, and certainly things seem to be headed in that direction. Thank you so much for joining us today on this.